Alrighty, how is everyone doing today? Welcome to my channel. This channel is for educational purposes, and we check out great theories, concepts, discoveries, and magnum opuses, tour de forces, and earth-shattering discoveries. Things that you um, need to dig for, and usually need to dig pretty deep. Um, I appreciate all the people out there in the truth movement that have been doing digging. Um, but usually it's not that deep. It's stuck in the 20th and 21st centuries. Um, but and so that's very effective, and it's very enlightening for people, and starting a whole movement and a revolution in the way we think. But eventually, we're going to have to kind of move to the next step, go a little bit deeper, way back uh, into history, into ancient history, but also into further and further into our hearts, into things that we really hold dear, um, things that we've invested in for not just us, but our ancestors going all the way back. And it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be, some more soul searching, and but we already have become good at that, and so you know we got to lead the way. But anyway, that's what this channel is for, and this feature here is called the Q-tip of the spear. This is usually me paying attention to um, podcasters out there that I think are on the tip of the spear, and in general the Q-tip Q, Q Q people, and just talk about some of the things that I've grokked from whatever I've heard. And I guess not much today, but you've heard me talking, if you watched this before, about how I believe that going forward, Christianity is not going to be a proper basis, regardless of what percentage of this movement is Christian, and because it's not true. Christianity can be proven to be a psychological operation from the Romans, and it's a myth. It is a fiction. It was a psyop. They needed to try to mellow out the Jews. They also wanted to mock and ridicule the Jews, who they had just gotten done fighting a war against, the Romans, and who they've been bothered by for over 100 years, since they, you know, first occupied Judea. And so the Flavian dynasty of Caesars wrote this fictional story about a Jewish Messiah who, contrary to the prophecies that were coming down to the Jews of a Jewish Messiah who was a military leader who was going to help them overthrow the Romans. Instead, the Romans wrote a story about a Jewish Messiah who was a Prince of Peace and believed in rendering unto Caesar, walking the extra mile, and turning the other cheek. And so um, this is also a Jewish Messiah who was very critical of the Jews. Whenever he was critical of anything, it was the Jews. And so he overturns the tables of the Jewish money changers, and um, yells at the Jewish merchants selling small animals at the outskirts of the temple, and tells his Jewish followers to abandon their families just to follow him. And so it goes on and on throughout the Gospels. Jesus never does anything against the Romans. Um, and then it continues in the epistles with Paul. Paul is even more deferential to the Romans and even more uh, critical of the Jews. Now, um, there's a lot of direct evidence as well, especially if you look in the work of Josephus. But the point that I'm making is that um, this is not uh, a basis to move forward into the so-called Golden Age. By the way, Flavian means golden. Flavian is the dynasty of Caesars who created this. And so I don't know if that's part of the message. I would have to imagine that it is. There's no way you can tell me that the 17th letter and the boss don't know that this is the truth, that the Romans are the true authors of the New Testament. Um, but maybe, and they need to be confronted with the information and see what they say. That's pretty much. I would love to pop the question myself if I would ever get that opportunity. But um, many of our founders of this country wanted to move forward on a platform of deism, not Christianity. Deism, the belief in one God who is good, who endowed us with higher logical faculties such as reason, intuition, wonderment, and wrote, God put his language, his, her, its language as nature, the language of nature, the laws of nature, the laws of math and physics, geometry, and the forms of nature, and gave us our higher faculties in order to directly comprehend God through nature, with no intermediaries, no verbal language to get fouled up. And that's really a big part of the problem for Christianity and really all of the written religions. But deism gives us, you know, an off ramp because it's still a religion. It's still God who is good. It's still got moral precepts that can be determined, but it isn't dogmatic or doctrinal. Um, I've been reading a lot in the last days about just how many religion, whether it's Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, how many people have been put to death because they didn't believe the right religion. Um, so anyway, I wanted to read this short little thing about deism, and I haven't even read. This is a reaction kind of thing. I have often written about how much deism has to offer people. This is like from the deism website. I think this is Bob Johnson. No, it's called Freedom Through Deism. I've often written about how much deism has to offer people. It is so much more than a mere alternative belief system to the so-called revealed religions. Through deism, people can experience what is their birthright, that is, the opportunity to develop into natural, free, and thoughtful human beings. Dogmatic religious teachings thwart and twist the natural development of a person by instilling fear into the mind at a very early age. The staggering impact of installing fear into the mind was made even more clear to me last week. I turned on the television to PBS documentary already in progress about a man who was born and raised into a devoutly Catholic family in Boston. The man discussed his childhood, his very close and loving family, and his education in Catholic schools, wherein the children were taught to revere priests as being right next to God. He then explained the common Catholic practice of going to confession and how he confessed his sins of talking back to his mother, fighting with his sisters, and then of engaging in a practice that is quite natural for adolescent boys. At one at once the priest told him that masturbating was a real problem and that he would need special help with this sin. He was told to meet the priest at the rectory. No, thank you. But anyway, the tragic story of abuse continued to unfold. The man was now well into his 50s, and for most of his life, he had never been able to tell anyone about he had suffered. Yeah, as a boy, he had been afraid and disgusted by what was happening to him, but he was unable to tell his own parents. His parents thought the priest was a wonderful person, so kind for spending so much of his time with the boys of the parish. Oh, wow. Um, yeah, well, this is not exactly what I was expecting it to be, but it, it's not at all what I was expecting it to be. I was expecting more of a critique that was um, less, you know, graphic than this, but we'll go on. When his very elderly parents finally learned the terrible truth, they were heartbroken. Both mother and father declared that they would have taken the law into their own hands had they known back then. And the priest in question is now deceased. The parents said priests who do things like that are terrible hypocrites, but they still consider themselves devout Catholics, and were saddened by their son's decision to leave the church. As deists, we are well aware of these acts of abuse, but throughout the program, I kept thinking about how this terrible thing could happen in the first place. What prevented the boy from running home and telling his parents? The answer, of course, is feelings of guilt and fear. Guilt and fear are crippling emotions, and the church works overtime to inflict both of these dangerous emotions in everyone. An important thing for us to consider as deists is that even though many people were never physically abused by clerics, everyone is emotionally abused by their teachings. We should consider the consequences of mental abuse on citizens at large. Why do citizens so meekly accept the lies of politicians? Is the root of all this evil the mind abuse of organized revealed religions? Thomas Jefferson thought so. He warned of the dangerous power of the clergy to collect and catechize us. Opportunities of delivering their oracles to the people in Mass, and of molding their minds as wax in the hollow of their hands. Now, yeah, so that's what I was saying is, I think in the truther movement, I think we have done a good job of kind of rejecting the idea of the clergy and just organized religion in general, but not so good of a of a job of rejecting the book, the Bible. That's also part of the problem. Um, just as much as the clergy and the church is the Bible is the problem, and both Old and New Testaments. That doesn't mean that they should be just thrown away or burned, but read with discernment and a critical eye. With turn back on your truther mode, because I see so many truthers just completely drop their critical faculties when the incantation Bible or Jesus Christ is mentioned. Those two incantations just put you in a trance and get you to drop your critical faculties, and all of a sudden you're in the this is the word of God approach. This is the word of God, so I can't question it. Uh, I can I can question it to a really very limited extent. But the general parameters of it is that this is the word of God. This is this is what they say it is, and this is something that is, highly esteemed as being, the most important book ever, and everybody needs to, um, you know, understand this. And if it doesn't resonate with you, then there's something wrong with you. And I feel like that is the part with the clergy and the church. That's a problem, but it's not such a big problem for the movement. Most, I think most of the people in the movement have broken themselves free of the clergy and the church, but not the book. And so that's what I focus on, because the book is a psychological operation. The New Testament is a psychological operation. The Old Testament is something different. It's more of it's a history book. There's accurate history in there. There's no God in there. God God is only participating in the Old Testament for the first uh, fraction of the first chapter of the first book, and then is replaced by a bunch of dudes who are called Elohim. Um, and the featured dude in the Bible is called Yahweh Elohim. And for some reason, it was translated as God, but it's not God. It's just a dude who's highly advanced in technology and pretty intelligent and quite powerful, but not God. He's got every personality disorder in the book. He's a very weak man, powerful, but like weak, spiritually weak. And there is no spiritual anything in the Old Testament. It's all, can you obey Yahweh? That's all it is. There's not be a good person because for the sake of being a good person. It's be a good person because Yahweh told you to. Do not kill because Yahweh told you to. Even though Yahweh does it like, you know, every page. Um, okay, let's finish this here. Jefferson knew well that the secret purpose of the church was to enslave everyone and to see to it that those who do this oppressing are glorified in both the church and state. When we contemplate this, we can realize how the abuse was enabled in the past and continues to this day. We can then more deeply appreciate our deist founders and know that as deists, we are offering more than an alternative religion. We are offering a true process of human emancipation from dogmatic enslavement. Yeah, so that's kind of how I see, uh, that there's some freedom to be had here, and there's just some better discernment and some more direct contact with the creator, um, that is less dogmatic. It's not going to be any burning at the stake or any, you know, um, any type of martyrdomdums. And it's something that also, though, is in our historical our heritage. Many of the top founding fathers, Jefferson, and to a certain extent Washington, Adams to a certain extent, Madison, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Paine, um, they were all deists. And so, it provides a connection, a historical connection with our founding and our nation. And I really feel like it should be the religion of our nation. Um, going forward, not Christianity, because Christianity is not true. And even if it was, I would still have a problem with it. But well, not if it was, not if all of it was true, but if even if the story itself was based on something that happened, and all the books were based on things that have happened, as opposed to having been written by the Romans as propaganda, um, I still have major problems with the story itself and just the kind of the belief systems. But mainly the problem is with the fact that it's just fiction, and it's a psychological operation and can be proven as such. It has been proven as such by many authors and by me on this channel in hundreds of videos prior to this one. So please check those out. Otherwise, like, share, subscribe, comment, contribute, and if you got any rebuttals, or you got any evidence for the existence of Jesus, um, outside of the Bible, outside of the Apocrypha and the other writings, because that would be circular reasoning, and then also outside of the Romans, because it was a Roman psychological operation. So, of course, there are going to be Romans who corroborate the existence of Jesus, like Josephus and Tacitus and Suetonius and Trajan and Pliny the Younger and others. All the church fathers were written by the Romans. It was a very long psyop. It lasted for generations. And it was very successful. It turned into the Roman Catholic Church and gave us 1,000 years of dark ages, until the Renaissance dug us out, and the scientific revolution, which was decidedly you know anti-Catholic. Um, so we have to really look carefully about how much good this religion, especially Christianity, but also, I mean, Christianity is my favorite of all the Western religions, which I consider to be Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Satanism, and um, scientism, otherwise known as atheism or communism. Uh, Christianity is the best of all of them, but it's still abominable, in my opinion. Just first of all, because it's not true, but second of all, because you judge the tree by the fruit. And Christianity creates good people in the 21st century. Most people that I know who are Christians are good people, but I do get concerned, because when people get into power, they tend to abuse that power. And I've seen over and over throughout history, when Christians actually do get in power, they start doing the persecutions themselves that they claim to be such martyrs of when they're not in power. And so I'm quite concerned about that. Anyway, like, share, subscribe, comment, contribute, and we'll see you next time on the Q-tip of the spear.